Yes, and be careful not to put it back down
I can
because
speak like this, yeah?
it makes noise.
Hello and welcome to the third edition of our Ideas Talk series. And today our topic is Growing Up Global, Teaching Kids to Navigate Cultures. Such a wonderful and interesting topic that will resonate with every layer, every segment of community. And I have an extremely interesting panel of experts who are joining me today. And I welcome you to share this link with friends and family, with educators, with those who are just interested in the betterment of our education system as well as the future of young leaders. We always say future generation, but that future is now. Without further ado, let me introduce my panelists of today. Joining us via Zoom from far away is Professor Joseph Shaules, Director of the Japan Intercultural Institute, as well as a host of a podcast called Deep Culture Experience. And the two lead ladies sitting with me today, Dr. Asma Abdullah, author and intercultural specialist, as well as Marie Singh, founding director of Cultural Impact. Welcome, panelists, and thank you for making that time to be here today.
Thank you, Jesse.
So, as you can imagine, before we launched today's discussion, there was a lot of background work and interaction with each other to really nail down the exact angle of our conversation. And I'd like you to join us and post your questions as well, because this is an opportune time to really have one-on-one with our experts who are not just authors, who are not just cultural specialists, but those who are really interested in ensuring that we navigate our collective future together for better understanding. Let me very quickly start with Ideas International. It is a licensed and Cambridge accredited educational institution with global portability. Now, what does that mean? That also includes the very fact that Ideas leads education with purpose. It is a community led school that's built on one very important belief, that is quality education should be accessible to all in a truly diverse classroom with local, international, and refugee students learning with and from each other. That being said, it is a school that emphasizes on future ready learning by hybrid education, innovative teaching, and real global exposure. And let that be our beginning point today. When we talk about raising global children, panelists, it is easy to focus on just exposure, different schools, different countries, different passports. But exposure alone, and you may agree, does not equal understanding. Diversity alone does not interpret differences with respect. And this is where the Ideas International concept, what is being taught at the school, comes through. At the heart of this conversation, I'd like to introduce two essential ideas. First, that children need a strong understanding of their roots, be it their language, their values, as their cultural anchor, but also that cultural skills must be intentionally developed through education, reflection, and experience. Well, that opens our discussion for today. Start with our panelists here with me. Navigating the educational landscape, what do you think parents are looking for, or perhaps what do they misunderstand about children absorbing culture today? Marie, let's start with you.
Oh, that brings me back many years back. This was a very real question for us when we. So I'm French. My husband's from Taiwan. We've never really lived as a family in either country, and so wherever we were, it was important to see what kind of education did we want for our children. Um, and I think it's always a mix of wanting the diversity from wanting children to learn from whatever context we are or the country we're in, as well as having a certain stability because parents being parents, we always have exams in mind. So it was, the choice of system. And so I think until today, and particularly here, and Asma will add to that as well as Joseph, but the end game often, maybe in my generation, was always around exams. Now, having children who grew up now, I say that was actually not everything,
Mhm.
and everything else they've learned
And
was
it has to be a more holistic,
correct.
wholesome approach. Dr. Asma, having written many books surrounding diversity and the understanding of culture as well, and from an Asian perspective, what do you think parents are looking for their children, and what are we really wanting to extend to our children when we talk about culture and diversity?
Thank you, Jesse. I think for Malaysians, because we are a multicultural society, one of the things that we need to recognize is that when you go to school, is it a homogeneous setting or a heterogeneous setting? So I think a lot of parents would try to decide whether they want their children to be exposed to different cultures through friends that they have, or they want a very homogeneous setting like residential schools, for example. I went to a residential school where it's all Malays, so it's very homogeneous. So sometimes when you are in a homogeneous setting, you're not so concerned about culture. So I suppose when parents decide what school their children should go to, they need to identify what will be the cultures that their children will be exposed to.
That's right. We talk also about how soft skills and hard skills need to
Mhm.
intersect at this point, and even how technology and AI are reshaping identity and our learning on the back of the very important pillar that is a culture or intercultural experiences. Joseph, coming to you now as director at the Japan Intercultural Institute, what are you seeing in terms of interpretation or even understanding about culture and how far that goes and what a role it plays in our academic and professional lives?
You're muted. Joseph, you're muted.
Pick up on what Asma was saying about when parents are thinking about what school or their schooling for their children, um, they're often thinking about academics and they're thinking about achievement. But a school is a culture as well. So the question that parents, I think, need to think about is what is the culture of the school that their children will go to? And if the children are going to a school that has a culture that's different than the one that they are familiar with, then that means that they need to both have pride and teach their children about the culture as their own culture, their family culture, but also they need to be ready for this, for their child to be exposed to a different culture at the school that they're going to. Because culture is not just a label of something that you call yourself. Culture is something that you navigate. It's something that you're familiar with. And so when the school that you go to will be the culture of that school, and the people that you meet at that school can have a very big impact on the child. And so I think thinking about the school as a center of culture, as something that the child learns to navigate, is one way for parents to think about the kind of school that they'd like their children to go to.
Can
Yes,
can I
Marie.
add on to that? Because it's exactly the question we had, particularly in Malaysia, because you have so many options of schools.
Yep.
Um, and so when we had to make that choice, the three we were thinking of is a Chinese system school for our children to learn Mandarin. We had a British system and we had an American system. And exactly what you're describing, Joseph, what was made us choose what we chose, we went, and we had a French system as well, which was an option. And it's not so much at that moment the exams that we were looking at, but exactly everything that you described. What are they? How are they going to grow up as young people with all these different culture and approach to learning that would come?
Let me open this question to all three of you. What happens, or what do you envision happening to a student who enters adulthood without any cultural self-awareness? Let's look at, sort of the extremes here to really understand how detrimental that can be, not just to success, but to them, being more in control of where their lives are going. Because Joseph, you did say that culture is navigating the world, and I think that's such a strong idea or concept, because it's not just an outward thing, it's also very, very internal. Perhaps we can start with you.
So one of the ways that I talk to my students about this is that culture gives you the feeling of what's normal. And so if you grow up in one environment, that is normal to you. And other environments, they're not very real to you, and they're not very normal to you. And it's very difficult to navigate in a world which is not real to us and which does not feel normal to us. And so exposure to different cultural worlds allows us to recognize that there are different normals. What is normal for me may not be normal for you. What is normal in this community may not be normal in that community. But this fundamental understanding that there are different normals, and that navigating these different normals is a part of being in the larger world. This is one of the ways that I talk to my students about it.
Thanks, Joseph. Come to you, Dr. Asma.
Yeah, I believe if you are studying right now, right, in the 21st century, right, or the world that is so interconnected globally. I call it the death of distance. There is no more distance now. You can reach. We can talk to Joseph, who's in Japan. As though he's next to us. So I think the future workplace is that interconnected world, and that means you need to understand differences. Because you will be working in a situation where people come from different orientation. Not only racial, it could be sexual, it could be age, generational gaps. So I think the child of right now, I think has to be exposed to differences, and the earlier they are in terms of identifying the differences, the better they will be equipped to face the world that is around us now.
Yeah. You've also authored a book called Going Global.
Yes.
I wanted to come to that,
Okay.
but just in a minute, while I
Okay.
hear what, Marie, you have to, weigh in on what we're talking about today.
Well, I think definitely in the workplace is something that I see, but the navigating the world that Joseph was mentioning, children are exposed to that way more than we were through, well, not just social media is another big topic, but it's easy access, as Asma was saying, to information stories from across the world. And if we read this with a narrow lens, we may misunderstand, we may uh, not comprehend what's happening. We may form judgment which are not informed by solid cultural knowledge. And so for that, yes, the world is becoming smaller. We hear that all the time, but it's not just because you're exposed that you will understand a different culture. And hence the importance to address that at the school level, so that people are equipped to understand what they're seeing.
And
You are
can I
part of the program, Joseph. Just I'll come to you in just under 20 seconds, but I just wanted to highlight the very fact that the Marie are part of what is known as the BIB, Building Intercultural Bridges. That's the program that is running at Ideas International, and that is a program that is taught to every student from 10 years old onwards. I think that is remarkable because it brings a global presence, a global understanding in a local setting. Joseph, yes, please don't let me interrupt you.
No, I was just going to follow up on what both Asma and Marie were saying about technology and how we're exposed in today's world. We're exposed to so much difference. But technology has there's two sides to it. One is it allows us to reach out to the world, but it also allows us to isolate ourselves to people the kinds of people that we like and that we know already. So we can isolate. Technology can isolate us, and it can also connect us. And in both cases, what I think is so important for students is that there is a difference between face-to-face, real-life relationships and communication, and online or social media relationships and communication. And that's one reason that the school culture is so important, because this is where we develop the human skills that you can only develop in a face-to-face with a real human being, because so often we can protect ourselves with technology. And here's an example. I have many students who come to study at my university in Tokyo and from all over the world. And one question I ask is, so how is Tokyo for you? And what's your impression? And I'll have students say something like, well, the first week it was so stressful. And I say, why is that? Because I didn't have data on my phone yet, and I couldn't use Google Maps, and therefore I had to actually ask someone for directions. That they are so used to using technology to protect themselves that they arrive at the airport and they're texting their friends back home saying, I arrived. And so where is the human connection? Where are the skills that they have interpersonally? These are what we have to have in person. That technology cannot create deeper understanding.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Marie.
Yeah, actually, that's part of the reason why BIB, Building Intercultural Bridges, started, Joseph. And you're very right to highlight that dual impact of technology. And the worst of it is when we're exposed to content that is alien to what we know, and we only discuss that content with people who are like us, who equally don't understand. And that's where the human connection that you refer to is lacking. So with BIB, that's exactly what we've tried to do, to bring back the conversation in person, in the room, among students, so that we're able to talk about our differences, or we're able to discuss in person about the impact that something that is very different has on us, and try to make sense of that together. How do we educate ourselves? And that's where the role of the teachers become really important.
Right, and I'm sure through that as well, you will notice that we are more similar than we think. There's always a culture of being different, or being from a different location, or different cuisine, for example, that makes us different from one another. But then really understanding culture, you can actually navigate to see how we can actually also be similar to forge better understanding. Dr. Asma, coming to going global right now,
Okay.
what is that concept, and how is that now? How do you see that really trying to teach or assist us in understanding or navigating international culture?
Yeah. I wrote a book called Going Global, but a friend of mine said that, Asma, I think you made a spelling error. It should be global. I said, no, it's going global, because I believe that if you are trying to understand cultures, or not your own, but if you have to relate with people from other cultures, you really need to understand your own culture first. So what going global means is that you have to be locally anchored and globally connected. And I want to relate to what Joseph was talking about, in terms of technology, because I find that with the aid of technology, you can actually be in your room and you are relating to someone from another culture. So you can start to initiate that conversation through technology, followed hopefully by a face-to-face interaction. So I think what technology can do is to facilitate that comfort level when you are relating with people from a different culture, different orientation, and it makes communication and conversation much easier. And also relationship building relationships now is so important, in business, in all the things that we do. We need to start by building relationships. So when we are able to use technology to enhance and facilitate that relationships, I think it's good to have that. And I think students at a young age must be able to be comfortable
To be open
to,
to that idea. And
yeah.
I want to go roundtable with this, because the concept of understanding your own roots to be able to engage with the world without any insecurities. Mary, walk us through those starting points, because the very big question now is also, well, how do we navigate interculture and international culture?
Well, the question of roots, I think it's something that Joseph and I probably we have made a question mark of where is home, where is where are our roots with the journey that we've had. It's a
Right, and both of you are great examples of that as well. We are quite Asian and
Yeah,
rooted here.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I guess the difference for Joseph and I, it was a conscious choice, I suppose, because we uprooted ourselves and we moved. I think for students within the school here, it's very different. It's something that diversity and being in different contexts, it's not necessarily a choice they've had. So I see that with my own children. Um, we were having that conversation in the car coming here with Asma. I have two. One has always been very conscious and asking herself, who am I? And she gets really annoyed when people say, oh, you're half Chinese and half French. She always likes to say, no, I'm 100% Chinese, 100% French,
Oh, that's nice.
and 100% third culture kid as well, because that's the environment she grew up in. Whereas my other son never ever asked himself that question. And he navigates the world very comfortably without thinking about his roots. So um, it's interesting to see how both um, worked with it. But I think the fact that this is a topic that was close to my heart has somehow equipped them both to be able to be solid wherever they're facing, and to have that curiosity to not just uh, want to learn about the others, but being able to share about who they are, what matters to them.
Joseph, I'll come to you in terms of the
Yes,
exposure.
I can just pick up on what Marie was saying, and one of the things Marie said, you said, Marie, I totally agree with. It's very different if you choose this yourself or if it's chosen for you. And I work with many students who grew up in an environment where they were put into an international school or they had an international education. And this is I don't know, I sometimes think it's a bit high risk, high return. When it works well, it works very, very well. But it's not impossible for a child to feel that they're not sure of who they are. And I often talk to students about it when in this way. I say that having a multicultural education or a multicultural background is a bit like having a superpower. It's a bit like being Peter Parker who's been bitten by the spider and who needs to become Spider-Man. When you have a superpower, it can feel like a great strength, but it can also mean that you feel different and you're not sure how to use your superpower in a way which is good and which benefits you. And I think that if students have examples of others who are using this background as a positive superpower rather than as a weakness, rather than as something that makes them simply different, then they can appreciate all of the benefits it gives them. And again, getting back to this idea of navigation, if they have practice navigating different worlds, then it's easier for them to have an identity as a bridge person, as someone who is bridging different worlds, rather than someone who has to choose between different worlds. And I think the sense of identity as a bridge, rather than as an island, is one way that we can talk about this to students.
That's such a great way to really make us understand. I like the superpower, approach as well. Joseph, your research shows that cultural learning is not automatic. Why do even highly educated people, as adults, struggle with what I could say perhaps cultural blind spots?
Because we're human beings. because human beings like to be comfortable. So I've done a lot of research with people who've been living abroad. And one of the questions I get is, what's the difference between people who adapt and people who don't adapt? And one difference is people who need to adapt. And often people who do not need to adapt often don't adapt. And so this is simply a natural part of being a human being, that we are fundamentally want to be comfortable. And this is why in a school, that when we're comfortable navigating these different worlds, then it's a natural next step for us to go out. But I have seen, for example, expatriates who go abroad with a big expatriate salary, and they don't need to adapt, and so they don't. And it's a tragedy, because it's having a foreign experience. You either grow or you resist. You cannot be neutral. You cannot not react. You grow or you resist. You either grow or you resist. And our job is to get people over to the growing side rather than the resistance side.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Asma, coming to you, would you like to add on that, particularly also from the lens or perspective of, here in Malaysia, where again there is this diversity and that concept of respecting each other and truly immersing oneself in understanding the different cultures is something inculcated in students from a very early age.
Well, I want to pick up what Marie said about her two kids, right? And I find that while you can learn the cultural dimensions and knowledge, through textbooks, but I think it's the lived experience that is very important. And I think what I find about children growing up is the opportunities that they have to interact with people who are not like them. Now, I want to share my own experience about studying abroad. And I find that, my experience studying I studied in Melbourne and then Los Angeles. And it is the outings and the interactions that I have with the locals that gave me the breadth and depth of understanding cultures. Now, you can learn in class concepts or templates or models or whatever, but until you interact with the local people, I think that's where the real cultural literacy comes, when you are able to interact and deal with differences. So I think the opportunity to communicate, not in the classroom, but outside, That is when you really understand about culture,
Put theory into
to put theory
practice.
into practice. And going back to what Joseph was talking about, I mean, I used to do orientations for expats, and you will find that a lot of expats only relate with people of their own kind, and they will stay in a community of their own kind. So you can go overseas, but if you stay with people of your own kind, you're not going to learn much about culture.
Right.
So I think there is this need to interact with local people and yeah, do the things that locals do.
Yeah. Just on that note, what do you say to Malaysian parents or perhaps Asian parents who often worry about children becoming too westernized, or if they
Oh,
interact, with other cultures, that they may lose or forget
yeah,
their very, cultural
value.
roots? And so I guess the question is, how can intercultural education enhance
Yeah,
identity
yeah,
rather than,
yeah.
be a threat of weakening
Well,
it?
this is where the going local, you know, um, is important. In other words, before you go overseas, you really need to understand your own culture, as well as the culture of the country that you're going to study. But more important is to understand your or be aware of your values. Because when when I studied in Australia and in US, the values of individualism are very important. So because of being uh, collectivists, Asians are generally collectivists. To be able to study in a society that is very individual, you have to learn to speak up. You have to learn to do things on your own. Whereas in a collectivistic society, you have the group to support you. So this is where understanding your cultural orientation is very important before you leave for your overseas studies or assignment, because if not, you will be swayed away. And I have come across Malaysian students who went overseas, came back, and tried to impose the values of the country that they were studying on their local friends, and they're totally alienated, because they don't understand their cultural values. So what is important is, when you are in, there is this saying, when you are in Rome, do as the Romans do. And so I think what is important is for Malaysians to really understand their roots, before they think about going overseas.
Right. How do we unpack what Dr. Asma has just shared earlier, bringing back the feeling a bit off because it doesn't resonate with those that you're interacting with back in your home country, for example, Joseph?
So, earlier, Jesse, you talked about focusing on how we're similar and how we can connect through being similar. And I think that's always the first step towards intercultural understanding. But if you assume that we're similar, sooner or later you will find that we're not. You will find differences. And as Asma was saying, going local means you need to encounter the difference. You need to feel what the difference is. You need to experience the difference. And one of the questions I get from students is, does understanding another culture mean that I have to do it? Does it mean that I have to agree with it? Does it mean that I have to adapt? I had, for example, a Malaysian student who was telling me a story here in Japan. She went with some of her college classmates and they went to a hot spring. And she was shocked when all of the Japanese girls started to take off their clothes, because in Japan, it's normal to bathe with other people of the same sex, and that is a normal thing in Japan. But this girl faced a deep dilemma. Should she adapt to this? Is she comfortable with this? What should her stance be? And so, this question of, does understanding mean adapting? And I think the answer to that question is, it does not mean adapting. It does not mean you have to change your moral compass. But what you need to do is understand what is normal for others. If you understand what is normal here, then you can choose yourself, your own moral compass. but it means you have to step back a little bit and say, okay, without judging too quickly, let me understand the way people do things. Let me understand what is normal here, and then I can choose. So understanding is not the same as adapting. We have to do that in order to stay rooted in our own values, even as we adjust and even as we adapt to cultural difference, which is not an easy thing to do, as I think the comments that both Marie and Asma have been making clear.
Right. Yes, Marie, coming to you as well at this point.
Yeah, so I'm French, so I tend to be quite contrarian, right? So when you mention the fact that to see where is our commonality, when it comes to culture, it's often what we hear. People say, oh, we don't want to be put into boxes when we do programs in organization. They say, we're not here to highlight the difference. We want to build a one team. We want to see what we have in common. And hence, and that often a little bit, well, I'm French, so I can be irritated. That's what we do as French people, because people are afraid of differences. And the question that you ask, I mean, the why behind that question is that there's a fear of something that is different from me, and then a lack of curiosity. So everything you said, Joseph, I totally agree with that. And then when I do programs, the key thing, it's not about knowing how to adapt, it's how to learn to say that, yes, I understand what you do or what you want to do, and it doesn't sit well with me. So I understand the context. I know that in this context, I have to accept it, but I don't have to like it necessarily. And we are afraid of that in today's world. We are afraid to tell each other that, okay, I get where you're coming from. And that's what, Joseph, you were saying, understanding the why it's done. But no, sorry, I don't want to strip and go bathing with you because I'm not comfortable. So go ahead and I'll go and have a nice sashimi while I wait for you. And this is something that we have lost a little bit in this world and that's what irritates people, because when we talk about culture, that's where we get pushback. It's all about being nice to each other, but we lose the sincerity.
And so I guess the question is also, can cultural competence, is that something that can really be taught in a classroom or in a setting, or must it then be lived through experiences like Joseph has shared at the falls in Japan?
Yeah.
You're looking at me, so I'll get started.
I just want to pick up what Mari said. To me, I think when you talk about culture, it's the challenge is when you have to make a decision. So in any interaction, when you need to make a decision, that's when culture pops up, because it deals with values. So if we come from cultures and our values differ, say for example, even in child rearing, so if you have a cross-cultural marriage and your husband is from another culture, it's at that point of decision making that culture becomes important, because he's going to come with a set of values that he grew up with, and you come from a set of values that you grew up with. So how do you navigate? And this is where I think perspective taking is very important. You need to understand the perspective of the other party, and this is where understanding values will be very important, and having a conversation. Otherwise you will clash. If you don't understand the values of your loved one. Yeah.
So at the Institute, Joseph, and at Ideas as well, Marie, how does structured learning really change the outcome compared to an ad hoc experience or ad hoc exposure?
Well, I'd like to, as a way to answer that, I'd like to pick up on what Asma was saying about when there's a decision, the culture comes in when there's a decision. And often we are not aware of our own cultural values. We are not aware of them until they come up, until there's something that happens. And so the goal of education is not to learn about the other. It is to learn about the cultural patterns within ourselves, as well as the cultural patterns around us. And these cultural patterns every family has a culture, every sports team has a culture, every company has a culture, every region has a culture. We have intercultural experiences in everyday life all the time. Going from grandma's house to my neighbor's house can be a cultural difference. So the goal is, as Asma was saying, perspective taking, of understanding that these different normals exist. And this is something that can be done with students who've never been into a foreign country, because they have experienced different normals in their life at some time in some place. And I think it's very important that that education is based in the learner's experience, and it doesn't have to be experienced in a foreign country, but to practice the perspective taking, as was saying, as saying, okay, so what is this other person intending? What is normal in this situation for this person? So I think that experiential learning and using learning that's grounded in the learner's experience is key to doing that. It's not easy to do in terms of education. It's easier to teach a bunch of concepts, or it's easier to say, we are the world, or it's a small world after all. That's easier. And we can feel good about the ideology of being nice to everyone. But the reality of foreign and intercultural experiences is that these differences come up. People are different, values are different, lifestyles are different. So how do we navigate those things?
Joseph, thanks. Marie?
Yeah, so I think in what you're both saying, it's finding the balance between experience and concept or theory. So maybe at the school level here, it's not concept, but to make sense of what is happening in the room. And I totally agree with you. That's your French experience, Joseph. Probably that's coming through. It's not through the nice things that the learning will happen. So how do we bring up the difficult conversation and help students have those discussions, being able to be explicit and be articulate about their own value? Why are they thinking in a certain manner? And being able to then listen to the other party. So we've done that here at the school with different tools. One is the BIB, the Building Intercultural Bridges, where we're bringing topics that are from the news and having the students express their different views. Now, what was really magical for me, it's to see students who at the beginning of the term, when my colleague Diva was running the module, the students were not able to really listen to each other. And there was a lot of fight, which is what you see on the news in many other ways. And throughout the structure that she brought in, we ended up the year with students truly listening to student being able to explain why they chose a certain view, and being able to then have that conversation and then agree to sometime agree and sometime agree to disagree. Yeah.
Dr. Asma, what emotional skills? Sorry, Joseph, were you
Yes.
coming in?
Yes.
Go ahead and ask Asma. I have my.
Steer the conversation towards emotional skills that children need in today's world to deal with cultural friction, to deal with the social media influence, whether negative or positive, and really understanding what that global landscape means for them as they enter the world. Obviously, the teaching of empathy and to have a perspective that is non-biased and balanced will, to some extent, help to reduce anxiety and to reduce any kind of social issues, which is what we're seeing a lot in many schools right now.
So you're talking about empathy, is
Yes,
it,
that would be one
or
of them.
emotional intelligence?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of right. I mean, a lot of articles. I mean, a lot of talk about having emotional intelligence. What is having emotional intelligence is all about, and I like to put it in the local context. I find that in Malaysia, I am a Malay, right? You are Punjabi,
Yes.
Punjabi,
Part of the Indian
right?
race.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can relate at the intracultural level, which means when I talk to my Malay friend, I'm relating at the intracultural level. When I'm relating with you, it will be the intercultural level. When I relate with Marie, it will be cross-cultural. So in a day, I can be relating at these three levels. Yeah. Now, going back to emotional intelligence, in the Malay culture, there is this concept of rasa, meaning if you are uh, emotionally intelligent, you need to look at the person without that person having to say anything. In other words, you can just look at the facial expression and you will recognize what that facial expression is saying.
Is that cultural intuition or is that
Cultural
judgment?
intuition, rasa, it's the concept of feeling. Yeah. So in other words, in among the Malays, if you have that skill of figuring out what that person is saying or feeling without that person articulating it, you have rasa. So empathy, emotional intelligence is the ability to detect that facial expression and what that person is feeling. That is why if you were to look at Malay movies, you have to see the facial expression versus American movies is all about action,
Right.
right? But I think Asian movies, I don't know, Joseph, maybe you can also talk about Japanese movies. You look at the facial expression.
Joseph, Japanese movies?
Yes, Japanese movies, you see many scenes where there's just a face. And it's the and it is the context that gives the power to the moment. And I really appreciated Asma's sharing of the local perspective. And let me share some research. I know that research is a big word, but there is research into empathy. And one thing that psychologists teach us about empathy is, first of all, it's not a single thing, it involves more than one ability. One of them is the ability to feel what someone else feels. And the other is the ability to know what they are thinking, to know what their perspective is. And one of the challenges of empathy is that empathy really depends on how you feel. And we know this from everyday life. If someone we don't like introduces us to their friend, we think, I probably don't like them. Negative feelings turn off our empathy. Positive feelings turn on our empathy. So positive feelings are very important. And this is why creating a supportive atmosphere is so important. But cross-cultural empathy is difficult because it may be difficult for us to understand someone else's perspective. But research has also shown, and this speaks to what Marie was saying about the activities that she's been doing. When you value empathy, you get better at it. If the community that you are in values empathy, then our empathy gets turned on. And this is one of the key roles of the kinds of activities, Marie, that I think that you were talking about, where we're valuing this ability. And so this, in fact, has a psychological impact on us, and it allows us to empathize more. So excuse me for being very research oriented, but I like this
We
stuff.
like that. We like that, Joseph. So one of the reasons why you're here is especially to get us understanding really the facts and the research behind it. Marie, at what age are you seeing children that are starting to form sort of assumptions, and what happens if we don't guide that process intentionally, especially through programs like BIP?
What do you mean by full
to,
intention?
to build this intercultural bridges, to give them a sense of identity. At what age do children start forming some sort of cultural assumption or judgment? The question is maybe as well, why is the sense of belonging as important as the sense of exposure?
Oh, that's a big loaded question. I'll need help here. um, I think, again, going back to what I've observed and coming into schools and seeing my children grow up in an international school, the the challenge that they see, it's being exposed to different environment which have different expectations. So and we see that again in the workplace later, but from a very young age is what is being taught and said at the school, and that's what I'm hearing at home. And that's where the role of the school becomes so important to guide the children through that complex environment and world they find themselves in. So there's not a particular age per se. It will depend on the children. I say some just navigate it and learn without giving it a lot of thinking, and that's what you were saying, Joseph, about being that's high risk, high return investment. Some children are able to absorb. Some will be really struggling with why is what I'm doing at home not being rewarded at school, and vice versa. I don't know if that answers your
Sure.
question.
We speak of identity, we speak of values, we speak of roots as well. But I think, the also one of the questions here to really pursue is what skills are going to matter in the next 10, 20 years? Is it just academic excellence alone? I think we've established that much, that value-based education is equally important. What skills are going to help students, or the future ready student, really navigate complexity and differences, Joseph?
Talk about a big question.
Your turn.
Easy.
Everybody, this is
Okay.
what every educator wants to know. This is what we all want to know. I think there are many people who talk about critical thinking. There are people who talk about being ability to use technology. There are people who talk about soft skills and the need for communicative ability. Um, all of those things are important. I do think that for educators to really try to understand the context of the child, that the world that the children are growing up in is different than the world we grew up in. And we need to really see through their eyes to help combine our knowledge with the reality that they are living through. How is it different to grow up with social media than to not grow up with social media? This is not something that's easy for me to answer, but it's something that we really need to have some humility, and in that sense have a very student-centered education, so that we as educators can appreciate the challenges that they are facing and will face in the world that they're growing up in.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Joseph. Dr. Asma, what do you think
Yeah,
is going to matter?
well, there's a lot of research in this area about the future skills. Yeah. And I think emotional intelligence is one of them. And I think in years to come, is being able to empathize, and feel the way the other party, is feeling. I'm also a coach, and I find that the ability to ask questions is very important before you make any judgment. And this is the challenge, I think, for managers, managers and leaders, who before they introduce anything, or pass a ruling, or a policy, or whatever, they need to ask lots of questions, because by asking questions you are actually empathizing. So this is where I find that if you have been if you have grown up, if you have had experience dealing with differences, you're more likely to accept people who are not like you, and empathize with them. And I think this is the core skills, I think, in years to come, to be able to feel like the other person is feeling.
Empathy and emotional intelligence.
Can I add? I was picking up my phone because I was actually looking at this afternoon. So, Joseph, maybe I do have a bit of an answer for you. I was looking at what the World Economic Forum is always looking at the skill of the future. And so, if you look at the 10 fastest growing skills by 2030, as expected, the first top three are technical, around AI, around network cyber security. But what you see right after that is around resilience, flexibility, agility, curiosity, lifelong learning. So, what cultural agility and the skills you learn are as important as the technical skills. And as Asma was saying, those technical skills are going to evolve extremely quickly. So, what is going to help you navigate again those changes are the skills that you can learn, your cultural competencies that help you navigate different contexts, different environments.
That's right. From what we discussed, of course, there must be a sense of balance between not just academic excellence, but also the element of cultural understanding based on some of what you've shared as well from the World Economic Forum as well. I have one question, and we have a lot of questions coming in from our forum here today, from our audience joining us worldwide. Amongst them is how does language shape cultural identity in a learning environment? Perhaps I'll open this question to you, Joseph. We don't have much time left on the clock, but I'm going to run through as many questions as I can.
So, how does language shape?
Cultural identity in learning environments.
Well, it's as I've been saying over and over, it also goes back to navigation, that language is what we use to navigate our relationships with others. Language is not simply a code. It is a way that we interact with other worlds, other social worlds. And so the interaction that we have in language is what gives us those cultural skills.
Mhm. Another question that's come in very quickly is, can global education, or perhaps an international based education, unintentionally flatten cultural thinking?
That's a question that we refer to a book that hasn't been translated in English, but many years ago, it's looking at the global culture. And so we talked about movie and Japanese movie, and there's always that sense that there's that nebulous global culture that's going to swallow everything.
Right.
But when you look
New world culture,
the
so
new
to say.
yes, but when you look at what people are actually consuming, and I'll use that word in culture, it's often extremely localized. You know, Malaysian people like to watch Malaysian drama. Japanese people look at Malaysian drama. I see the same thing in France. So the two again come hand in hand. We're adding on. We're not flattening. We're not we're not being less of. We're being more of by opening up all these cultures.
Not less of, but more of.
Of
I think
more.
that is really key in highlighting that difference, Dr. Asma.
Well, the concept of global to me again goes back to going global. Becoming um, very true to yourself. You know who you are in terms of your cultural baggage, but you're also very comfortable to relate with people who are not like you. And I think this is the challenge for global education, where you expose young people to be comfortable wherever they are with differences, with diversity, so that the global setting or the global workplace will be something that they are comfortable with wherever they are. And I suppose in terms of language, I mean, you have to be conversant in the English language. I cannot see any other language at the moment, that would be widely spoken. So yeah, there you are. Language, maybe English.
Well, as we celebrate humanity, kindness, which is in pillars at Ideas International, we also take a look at how empathy and emotional intelligence, as well as cultural and intercultural, cross-cultural understanding, really enhances our future. Before I wrap, I'd like to go again roundtable. Panelists, what gives you hope when you look at the next generation? If there's one quality we must protect at all costs as we raise global children, what would that be? Marie, I'll start with you.
Oh, for me, it's simple. It's humor. Let's be able to laugh about ourselves and in how people, the funny side that people see in us, and let's not get too worked up about cultural. Uh, yeah, being offended about culture when
I think
people don't get
that's
it.
so important. Take it with a pinch of salt, and not to be, immediately threatened
Yeah,
by someone's
exactly.
humorous approach, perhaps. Dr. Asma.
Well, I am, my background is in anthropology. Anthropology talks about observation, and very important that you observe. You spend time observing, listening before you make a statement rather than, react. So I find that it is very important that you observe, listen, and then talk.
Seek to understand
Speak
first
to
before
understand.
we
Yeah.
want to
Exactly.
understood.
Exactly.
And Joseph, to you for the closing and summary today.
Well, if, as Marie says, you have a sense of humor, and as Asma says, you are able to observe, then this is what gives you empathy. This is what gives you the ability to look at things from another perspective, even as you have your own perspective. And that's what allows the learning process to keep going. So I would go back to this empathy.
Thank you very much for that. Such an interesting conversation. I don't know how 60 minutes has just absolutely flown by. I'm trying to hold on to a little bit more, but I understand that we are on a timeline. But as we close this conversation, one thing has become clear, that culture is not something children or students will inherit passively. It's also something they must learn to interpret, negotiate, and live with intention. And the future is not just shaped by those who knows the most facts, travel to the most countries, or even speak the loudest. It will be shaped by those who can listen across difference, lead with empathy, and remain grounded in who they are while they engage with others. So thank you, speakers, for weighing in. It has been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure. Thank you to our extended community, as well as our listeners and viewers that have joined us across the globe. And of course, to everyone who believes that education is not just preparation for work, but preparation for life. And before I leave you, there's this very interesting book that I must encourage you to pick up. It is called Global Minds, Malaysian Roots, Thriving in Multinational Cooperation. Written and authored by our two ladies right here, Dr. Asma and Marie as well. It is a wonderful read, and I'm sure it's available in bookstores as well as online.
Yes, online on our website.
Okay,
Yes.
so that was a small little pitch there and a hook. But if you found that today's conversation has made sense and is something you're interested in, then do go pick up this book. Thank you, Joseph, for joining us all the way despite the time difference. And thank you for being so actively involved in our preparation and our discussion here today. Thank you very much, ladies,
Thank
as
you.
well. A big thank you to Ideas International for putting such conversations like this at the forefront, and especially getting experts to weigh in and share not just their experiences, but their research and their knowledge in this area. International culture, cross culture, interculture, and why that matters to each and every one of us. I'm Jessy Chahal signing off. We'll see you at the next edition of our Ideas Talk. Till then, do take care.